Morning, Kristen. Is my audio and video okay?
Loud and clear.
Great. Do we have a court report this morning?
Yes, Maggie's with us.
All right. Morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Chair Foster.
How are you?
Loving yourself, thank you.
Okay. I see. Jess.
I just turned my camera on if you didn't see me, Owen.
They changed the formatting of this thing, so it's hard to tell where people are. Are members Walsh and Lunch here?
I'm here.
Whoops, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Great.
Oh, and there's a button at the top that says view. And if you click on view, you can prioritize video so that the video, whoever's got their camera on, will be front and center for you
Oh, I see.
before all the others who don't.
Great. That's helpful. Thank you. And Mark, I presume you're on?
Yep, I'm on.
And you had some slides. Are those ready?
Slides are ready and they'll be on the website just momentarily.
Great. All right, then, Maggie, we can go on the record.
We are now on the record.
Today is September 11th, 2024, and I call to order the Green Mountain Care Board's hearing. Today, we have a number of hospital budget deliberations and votes noticed. And first, before I get to those, I'll give a little bit of the agenda. We'll take public comment if there is any on the motions that have been presented in the last week or two by the board. Sorry, Kristen, could you put that back up? Then we'll have standard budget conditions. Then we'll have a number of hospitals where we had made motions, and we will take votes on a number of them that have not had adjustments since they were initially presented. We will then have motions after that on a few hospitals where the staff recommendation has changed based on the feedback and comment and additional information that's come into the board since the motions were initially made. Then we will have an executive session, which I think will probably be after lunch or around there, depending on how quickly or not this goes. And in the executive session, we'll receive legal advice from our counsel. And then after that, we will take up the enforcement motions and some potential staff changes, some feedback from hospitals and board members that's come in since the initial enforcement motions were made. So with that, I will open it up initially to any public comment, recognizing that a lot of people have submitted things via writing, but I can open it up now via raise the hand if there is any additional public comment. Mr. Del Trecco.
Thank you, Chair Foster and board members. Maybe during today's presentation, which isn't still not yet posted, which makes this work very difficult to make public comment about. There are three things that I've continually asked the board about. One, what is the anchor year? Is it 22 actual or 23 or 22 budget? There are more than one reference to each of those things throughout the 23 guidance and the 24 guidance. It's very unclear. Very difficult to do business this way. Two, why is there continually no recognition for the increased utilization in these budgets created for access? This is something that the board has called on for our hospitals to improve year over year. And then I continually struggle with the terminology being used, change in charge, commercial charge, net patient revenue. It is frankly all over the place. The titles of the charts are very difficult to read. And to me, there's still no clear understanding of the value of the NPSR reductions being proposed in the motions, number 1 and 2, are they the same? Are they total? Historically, our hospitals have had a clear line of sight on this. Very, very difficult to respond to questions on the fly here without information. And I think we can do better. I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll respond briefly. I think some of these comments will be addressed today as we go through, or if not, on Friday. But some of these that you just made, Mr. Del Trecco, will be discussed, I'm sure. Other public comment?
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, Mike Fisher here. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Mike Fisher, healthcare advocate here. I just wanted to briefly, I know that myself and my team have maybe tried to articulate this already, but I feel compelled to do it again. I just want to recognize the pretty tremendous divide between what hospitals have asked for and what the board is contemplating here. And I just want to step back from it for a minute and ask sort of the same question I've been wanting to ask for a while. I don't know who is going to pay for it. And, I don't know, when I think about sort of the impact of these budget asks on Vermonters, at the end of the day, these dollars, I think hundreds of millions of dollars, have to be paid for. And I don't have an answer. I don't think anybody is contemplating that the commercial ratepayers can afford it, that small groups can afford it. I don't think anybody, I know that there's been some discussion about whether the money could come from the Fed. By the way, I'd be happy to would support fully funding DISH. Yes, we should do that. That's $32 million. It's not that much money. So I don't expect a pile of money to fall from the sky, negotiations with the federal government, certainly not for 25. I know that the state government is not poised to contribute, and I know that ratepayers can't pay it. And so I'm just left with that challenge in the middle of this conversation. I know that doesn't answer the question, do hospitals need it? What's the impact of not giving hospitals this money? But I don't know where the money's coming from anyway. That's my comment. Thank you.
Any other public comment at this time? Mr. Wooden?
Yes. Hi, good morning. Want to at least make sort of some positive comments and maybe change this. I don't know when else I could make this comment, so I just wanted to make it now. I'm not sure when it would be appropriate. This is really difficult work, and I think you guys, as the state of Vermont, you represent all of us. We continue to pore over this. There's a lot of input, a lot of involvement, and we're all trying to figure this out. Healthcare is the most complicated industry in America, probably second only to space travel. So you're trying to address something that's really complicated, and everybody's participating. One of the concerns that I have, just planting a seed for the future, is that we rely on data, and it must be accurate. And we rely on assessment of systems, and it must be accurate. And yet, over the many years, and I've been sitting through hearings for 25 years, there always continues to be this discussion of what does the data mean because of finances. They're not that cut and dry. I know an Excel spreadsheet is because I can add up a column and I know how to do percentages, and my background's engineering. But when it comes to finances, there's still a lot of broad interpretation, if not art. I know I'm talking, and it really makes it hard for you guys to figure this out. And, every year I keep hearing, well, that's different how we do that, or we count that, or whether it's, the true expenses, where they're allocated, whether it is cash, whether it is debt, depreciation, average age of plant. So I just want to petition that if we're all going to do this, it would be nice if we had a single audit firm for every hospital, the same audit firm that you would use, so that when you have discussions about whether it's compensation or even these new discussions about efficiency, which I can appreciate, the efficiency and the comparisons, it would be nice if we would maybe lead the country and be the first state to say, listen, we got a single auditor over the healthcare system. And it really does allow us to have more confidence, because over the years, I could give you so many examples where it's just wildly different. For many years, we had somebody, addressing expenses below the line that were quite significant, 340B refunds that were actually below the line, went on for years. We've had discussions about cash or discussions about how you allocate expenses. It is super complicated. We count on our auditor. It's a national auditor. I just want to throw that out because I think that improvement would help us all, because it's hard to have the discussions and understand it, and then to find out that there are nuances with how you address cash, or what does the parent have, or, a home cost report. So that's all. I appreciate the work you're doing. It is really difficult, both intellectually and emotionally, given the story. So thanks for all your work, and just wanted to throw that out there as maybe something for consideration this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wooden. Any other public comment? If people don't mind, I have just a couple of those things were relevant to thinking that we've been doing. And on the single auditor firm, the board doesn't have money allocated to hire an auditor to do that work. Although I think Mr. Wooden's point is really well made and something that we should pursue. And if VAS and the hospitals would like to pursue that in collaboration with the board, I would support it. I think there is variation in how hospitals report information and where they put in for, allocate finances. And it's important to have that. So I would support that if that's something VAS and the hospitals would like to do. In terms of, I think this goes to both Mr. Del Trecco and Mr. Fisher's comment about utilization and affordability. Utilization costs money, and somebody has to pay for it, whether it's rate or utilization. And so that's part of the consideration of what we do here, is trying to balance those things. We can't just have unlimited utilization, or you will bankrupt the insurers and we will bankrupt the state. And a major goal of our healthcare reform as a state is to move care out of expensive places to less expensive places. That's why we have an ACO. That's why we have a very large PHSO structure at our major network hospital. And the other is population health. So we can achieve budgets and global budgets, which this is a form of, if we achieve better population health. So for the last, 5 years, there's been very significant increases in the amount of revenue the board has dedicated and approved going to hospitals. And it was concerning this year that we heard that utilization is spiking rapidly and acuity is increasing. If our population health efforts and our state decisions at the board to give a lot of money to the hospitals are not achieving population health, and we're seeing increased acuity and illness, then we're not doing our population health goals. We do want more access, for sure, but that also has to be considered in context of whether or not people can pay it. And that's why the processes on enforcement are out there, so that there can be adjustments in price so that we can get more access. And last year's board decisions, I think, were very clear. And I know I spoke publicly to it when I was asked in maybe a couple interviews. We gave very large NPR increases last year, but lower rate increases, so that we allowed for that room for the access that was needed appropriately without bankrupting the system. So that was our thinking last year, was they were way above guidance NPRs, but with lower prices, so that there would be that space to also consider the affordability of the system and people's ability to pay for it. So thank you for the public comment. I think these are really important discussions, and all those contexts are very, very relevant. And obviously, this is the core crux of our challenge: affordability, access, and quality. And those are not always perfectly lined up to some formula. But the input everyone gives and all the information helps us, and I appreciate it very much. So with that, why don't we go back to the agenda? Okay. There's been some adjustments to the standard budget conditions, and I'll turn it to Mark Hengsler, our counsel, to present those.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you on this beautiful fall morning. I'm going to go ahead and get a deck loaded in here. And while I'm doing so, I will respond to one item and say that I do apologize for the last minute of getting these up on the website. We strive to get these up on the website ahead of hearings. So my apologies. As Vaz may be aware, we had some evening submissions last night from some hospitals with objections to various items, and some of those concern standard budget conditions. So what we wanted to do is at least do our best to look at those as much as possible before presenting today, and consider any changes before putting a deck up. I think that's the kind of the trade-off of getting comments. You know, I'm happy to get comments, and getting comments yesterday was fine. I could look at them, but needed a little bit of extra runway to get a deck onto the website. Okay, so standard budget conditions. We've been talking about these now for 3 deliberative sessions. I am only proposing one change from what was presented on the 9th from what is being presented today, and that change goes to paragraph B, which has been a paragraph that has gotten a lot of comment and has received a lot of deliberation on our end. This is a paragraph that is about setting change in charge and commercial rate. I want to say that I'm deeply appreciative of the public comments that we've gotten from hospitals, because it's really helped to clarify for me how we could change language to work. And what I'm proposing is language that is exactly what we did last year without any change at all. So the new language here, I'm going to read it, is what was in budget orders last year. Hospitals' overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increase are approved at not more than X% over current approved levels, with no commercial negotiated rate increase for any payer at more than X% over current approved levels. The commercial negotiated rate increase overall with respect to any payer may be less than X% as negotiated between the hospital and payer. And I will say, I'm going to make a slight correction as to myself. There is one additional word here, which is the word negotiated instead of so instead of rate, we're saying negotiated rate. That use of negotiated rate instead of rate is purely a clarifying adjective. So there was some confusion about rate. There's been discussion about what that means. Staff felt that the term negotiated rate was as clear as we could possibly be. If there's any concern from hospitals as to the term negotiated rate instead of rate, we are happy to take it. But that is the one change from the budget order last year, is a clarifying adjective to rate so that it says negotiated rate. So I'm going to go ahead and click through the next budget conditions. I'm not going to read them all because we have read them all in deliberations. Nothing else here is marked as in a different color because it's all the same as presented on the 9th. Same is true for this slide. And then finally, same is true for this slide. So what you're getting is what you got on the 9th with a change to the language in paragraph B. With that in mind, we did receive a recommendation that I want to bring to the board's and public's attention. So last night at about 5:15, the UVM Health Network submitted written objections to the board concerning numerous items, and one objection was to the language that we had proposed in paragraph B on the 9th. And again, that was language that used some terminology that's not there anymore. What we're using now is just reflective of what we did last year in the FY24 budget orders. With that in mind, what UVM included was a requested modification to the language. And I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention because the modification, as far as I understand it, the request for modification is very similar to what I have in front of you in and just read with some additional lines. There are some small changes of word. I'll do my best to point everything out that I see that's different, but I'll read what UVM's recommendation is so you can hear it and mull it over. So UVM's recommendation is as such. Hospitals' total change in charge and aggregate commercial negotiated rate increase. Notice the word aggregate, that's different. Are approved at not more than X% over current approved levels with no change in charge or aggregate commercial negotiated rate increase for any payer at more than X% over current approved levels. Aggregate commercial negotiated rate increase refers to the net changes in allowed amounts for services and items, recognizing that some service or item prices may decrease and others may increase to achieve the aggregate adjustment. Allowed amounts refers to the amount to be paid to the hospital, insurance payments plus patient cost share. The total change in charge and aggregate commercial negotiated rate increase overall, or with respect to any payer, may be less than X% as negotiated between the hospital and payer. So that was the recommended modification from UVMHN. With that, I'm going to turn to proposed language for a motion to take up the standard budget conditions. And what I'll point out is that this is a motion to approve the conditions as presented with any modifications that the board wants to discuss. As presented means the first 4 slides that I presented with the old FY24 language in blue on the first page. As presented is not the recommendation from UVM. So as presented, to be included is the default conditions for the FY25 hospital budget orders, subject to any changes to the budget conditions or additional conditions approved by the board for specific hospitals. So that's the suggested motion language. And with that, Chair Foster, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. I've probably said this, but I'm going to say it again. It's immensely impressive, the work ethic and effort you guys have put in to get this, prepare it overnight, getting many, many comments, and from the hospitals to provide all this. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank everyone again for helping us work through all this. I think we should have board discussion on the standard conditions as proposed, and if any board members have thoughts on the proposal from UVM. So I'll open up to the board members for discussion on the standard conditions.
I wanted to just thank Mark for working on that condition around the commercial charge, because as I think folks know, I did raise some concerns with that, so I appreciate that. I guess I would be interested if folks do have any thoughts on UVM's language. There, to me, it seems a little clarifying, but I also, recognize that what Mark is proposing is the same as last year. So I'm fine with that as well. But if folks are interested in talking about that, I'm happy to engage in that, but also fine if folks don't have thoughts.
I'd actually like to hear from you, Mark, about your thoughts about the term aggregate. I did take a peek early this morning at UVM submissions from 22 to 25, and the orders in 21 to 24. And in 22 and 23, UVM used the term aggregate in their submission, but not in 24 and 25. And then within UVM's order, we've used effective commercial rate at times, and then commercial rate increase in 24. So if you could sort of just discuss what you think about the impact of the term aggregate in this, that would be super helpful for me. Thank you.
I don't want to give you a cop-out response. I do think that really what we're striving for here is as much clarity as we can possibly achieve between the board, between hospitals, and between payers. And I think a challenge is that we're talking about a system of payments that is complex. So it might, I think I'm probably not wearing the correct hat to speak to any ripple effect of the term aggregate, especially only having thought about this for however many hours I've been awake. If Elena has any thoughts from the health systems finance perspective, I certainly don't want to put Elena on the spot. If the board wants to take public comment on this term, that'd be fine too.
And Mark, maybe I should say, if we were to talk about this in more detail, that we should do this as legal advice in executive session, sort of to discuss the terminology that we're using in our orders. So I don't know if why don't we see where things go, and then if that makes sense to do that within an executive session at some point today, maybe we could add it to the afternoon executive session discussion.
The only comment I would have is that I think that I would want to hear from other hospitals and the insurers before I moved forward with this change. I think some of this is actually less clear to me. And I think it probably makes more sense for consistency and clarity to actually continue to use what we used last year, which is very similar to prior years. There's been a number of questions raised about the order language, so I think everyone understood the prior years and didn't have any questions on that. So it makes sense to just continue and then get more feedback this next year. People and the insurers have views on this kind of proposal.
Yeah, I'm comfortable using last year's language. I would want to discuss in executive session if we were to consider any changes to prior year's language. I'd like some more legal advice.
We can flag that for this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm comfortable using last year's language. I like your suggestion, Chair Foster, about gathering some input from other hospitals and payers on the proposed language, which I'm open to, but need more understanding about it.
Any other board member comment or discussion on the standard conditions?
I would just add that I am comfortable with the language up here, which is slightly modified from last year's language.
Okay, why don't we take the motion then, and then we can take public comment since I see a hand raised. I move to approve the standard budget conditions as presented to the board today to be included as the default conditions to the fiscal year 25 hospital budget orders, subject to any changes to the budget conditions or additional conditions approved by the board for any specific hospitals.
I'll second.
Any other board member comment at this time or discussion? I'll take public comment via raise the hand, and I see Ms. Bertrand. I believe, Ms. Bertrand, you're with the CFO of Rutland, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for letting me chime in. And so I guess in terms of Rutland's position on this, we did submit public comment also trying to outline the differentiation here, and would actually object to the standard order without including the aggregate language, and I'll explain why. In the aggregate for us, it's 2.8%. When we have no more than 2.8% for one commercial payer, that limits our negotiation, as I have two commercial payers where one is at 3.05% and another at 3.01% in terms of my negotiated rate that I'm proposing. And that's only specific to the price element of that discussion. and not the impact of utilization or shifts in payer mix in that discussion as well. So this is limited to just the change in charge that we're applying in our charge master. And to Board Member Lunge's point, we do only have one charge master that we utilize. But the issue is we do not put language in the standard budget order conditions that outlines that I may have other payers that are higher than that 2.8%. Now, when you go to the negotiating table, they're coming back to that 2.8% and not to the 3.05% that I built into my budget. That also translates to the fact that now my MPR will be less than what's being approved by the board because I have put into the budget those higher percentages for those two other payers. And I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. That was at least what I had understood of the concern. So thank you for clarifying that. Is really helpful to make sure we had it right, our understanding. Any other public comment? Okay. I am going to move to table this motion so that we can take it up on Friday, so that there is opportunity for additional public comment. So the motion's been made, it's been seconded, and I now move to table this motion until the board's meeting on Friday, September 13th.
I'll second.
And all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. That motion is tabled till Friday on the standard conditions, and the public comment period remains open.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to turn us now to a more procedural task, which is that with the paragraph B language taken up by the board today as tabled, I want to ensure that we have consistency between that language and the motions that the board is voting on and considering. So the next motion that I'm going to pull up for you as a suggested motion is an omnibus motion designed to amend the language of all of the motions that have been made and tabled regarding individual hospital budgets or individual hospital enforcement actions, so that the language in those motions simply conforms to the language in paragraph B as it's been taken up. And I'll just go ahead and I just want to make sure that everybody has full clarity on what we're doing here. So what I'm going to do is show you an example of the change to an individual motion that this omnibus motion would be making, so that everybody can see what the difference is. I'll just go to the next slide for a second to do that. So just to take an example, I think this is going to be SVMC. This was SVMC's motion language as taken up by the board on the 6th. And the change that this makes is a change to item 2, and the change is represented in blue. So instead of using the language that corresponded to the initial paragraph B as proposed, this language now corresponds to paragraph B as taken up by the board and states, in this case, with FY25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at not more than X over current approved levels. So again, this is an omnibus motion that is designed to just create parity so that we don't end up with any confusion for the public or for the hospitals about what's being voted for each individual motion. So with that, here's that omnibus motion language for you to take a look at and consider.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that description, Mark, and for this motion language. I will make the motion. We can have a board discussion, and I'll open it up for public comment. I hereby move to amend all tabled motions currently under this board's consideration that concern either 1, individual hospital budgets, or 2, individual hospital enforcement actions, such that the language in these motions conforms to the language taken up by this board in paragraph B of the standard budget conditions as discussed today.
I'll second that.
And I'll open it up for public comment on the motion. And all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And the motion is approved.
And next, I'll turn us to individual hospital motions. And Chair Foster, I'll turn it to you at this point, and I'll just be in charge of moving through the deck as we go along.
I just need a moment to get myself oriented to exactly where we are. And Mr. Hanksler, the blue language is again the changed language that we just discussed.
That's exactly right. So what you have in front of you is exactly what you took up and voted on, or sorry, took up as a motion on the 9th and the 6th for these hospitals. And these motions now simply incorporate the language that you just that we just discussed. So what you have here is unchanged, but for the section in blue, which is now the motion language that's before you.
Got it. And so just so any hospitals participating or the public, the motions that we're taking now are not changed from the from the staff recommendation in terms of the rate and NPR changes. So I will move to approve SVMC's budget with modifications as follows. With fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 3.5% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 3.5%, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
And I'll open up to board discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. The motion is approved. The next motion is, again, another one without modification from the staff recommendation that we heard earlier as to Rutland. I move to approve RRMC's budget with modifications as follows. With fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 5% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, reduced from 6.1% and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 2.8% over current year approved levels, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount, and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
Any board discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. And the motion is approved. The next motion is Grace Cottage, which also did not have changes from the staff recommendation. I move to approve Grace Cottage Hospital's budget with modifications as follows. With fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 6% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, reduced from 12% and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 2.5% over current approved levels, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
Board discussion. The only thing I would note is Mr. Hanksler, if I recall, this was the one that was subject to a friendly amendment last time we brought it up. Is that correct?
That's right. So the slide from that session would show the incorrect language, and then the friendly amendment corrected the language to correspond with Grace Cottage's proposed budget.
Okay, so this represents the change with the friendly amendment that had been approved. Okay, great. Thank you for confirming. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. The motion is approved. The Gifford motion also is without adjustment from the staff recommendation. And I move to approve Gifford's budget with modifications as follows. With fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 3.5% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, reduced from 8.2, and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 6.8%, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount, and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
Any board discussion?
I'll just note that I am going to vote in favor of this recommendation, but I still have concerns that the ratio between the change in overall charge and the NPR is potentially off given where how hot they're currently running. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
And just for clarity, Ms. Member Lynch, you're referring to the projected 24s in your comment?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other board discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And the motion is approved.
And Chair Foster, I'll step in for this one. I noted a clerical error in this one that I'd like us to correct. That one's on me. And the error is that NPR, North Country requested an NPR of 1.6%. That was the staff recommendation, what was taken up by the board. But there's language in that first line about a commensurate reduction in operating expenses, which is language that we've only used for modifications of NPR, because of course there'd be no commensurate reduction if we're taking what they proposed. So here I would just recommend a adjustment to this language so that item 1 reads, with FY25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 1.6% over its FY24 approved budget, there's no reduction in operating expenses that's necessary for North Country under this motion.
It would seem we could leave it since there isn't one, right? And just note on the record that there isn't one, so they don't actually need to reduce any operating expenses.
Same result. Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay. I think it'll be clearer to do that. And I'll just state on the record that my understanding is that there does not need to be a commensurate reduction given the growth rate in NPR is approved as submitted. I will move to approve NCH's budget with modifications as follows. With fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 1.6% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge, commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 4.7%, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
Any board discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And the motion is approved.
And here, Chair Foster, I'll note an item that occurred to me with Mount Escutney that I want to bring to the board's attention. This is the language as taken up by the board on this, I believe it was on the 6th. And there was some communication from Mount Escutney afterward regarding an approved CON and the fact that what it had proposed had initially included CON. And then there had been some discussions with staff after to adjust out that CON. The language taken up by the board as present here is language to approve a budget as submitted, not to approve a budget with modifications. And as submitted uses NPR of 3.2% and commercial negotiated rate increase and overall change in charge at 2.2%. I believe those figures are representative of the request without the CON. Should there be any confusion on the record about this being a potential modification of Manascutney's original request, it might be appropriate to make this motion as one with modifications or take some other action to clarify for the record.
Okay, I'm sorry, let's make sure I've got that correct. So there's a little bit of history in this that was, so Manascutney had a CON that was approved. And is my memory correct that the CON indicated that the CON couldn't impact the hospital budget for 25?
That sounds familiar to me. I wasn't directly involved in the process.
Why don't we do this? I wouldn't mind a little more clarity on this one. So why don't we put a Scutney aside for the moment?
Sounds good.
Okay.
We can take it up later.
Okay. Brattleboro has not changed in the motion from the staff recommendation, and I move to approve BMH's budget with modifications as follows. With fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 2.5% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 4.7%, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
And board discussion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Not sure if I heard Member Holmes.
Aye.
And the motion is approved. NVRH's motion and has not been modified since the recommendation from staff. And I move to approve NVRH's budget with modifications as follows. With fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 3.5% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, reduced from 3.9%, and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge to commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 4.5%, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I will second.
Board member discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. And the motion is approved. Springfield likewise does not have any changes from the staff recommendation, and I move to approve Springfield Hospital's budget with modifications as follows. With fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 6% over its fiscal year approved budget, reduced from 13%, and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and a commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 2.2% over current approved levels, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
And I'll open up to board member discussion. I will acknowledge that this one was one that we worked on with staff, or I worked on with staff and had a number of questions about, and this was a harder decision in many ways. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and open it up to other board members for any discussion or points that they had.
This is Tom. I found the public comment put forth by Springfield CEO persuasive. Here, I read this order as us limiting the growth of a low-priced hospital with good quality that is trying to recapture care in its local community. These wouldn't be additional. These are expenses that are happening to the state. So I have some reservation about capping NPR at less than half of what they believe they could achieve, because they are a low price hospital. They're under new leadership. They have been reducing expenses for several years, and I think they're on the right path. So those items give me some pause about limiting their NPR this much.
Any other board members?
Yeah, I
Go
too feel similarly to Tom. I think Springfield is lower priced than all of the surrounding hospitals, and any services that could be pulled back to Springfield from the surrounding areas would, I think, likely lead to overall less healthcare expenditure in the state and improved access for their community. I think there's a geographic equity issue as well. So they're asking for a pretty low price increase, 2.2%, and given that their prices are already low, that actually is quite a bit lower than what would be the average 3.4% price increase, just because it's a lower price, so the percentage increase on that is a smaller amount of dollars. So I don't see limiting Springfield's ability to pull market share as strategically beneficial for Vermont and Vermonters in the short term and long term. So I would be much more comfortable with giving Springfield closer to their full NPR ask.
Other board member discussion? These are some of the issues that I struggled with on this particular hospital, but there was also, I think, in the discussion we had before, some concern about the expense growth or potential expense growth, or whether or not it necessarily zeroes out. Are they taking it from somewhere else and it's thus cheaper on net, or is it additional? There's a lot of complexity to whether or not that happens. I would also note that if they are running high, there's certainly the amendment process that they could pursue, and we could look at it if they are able to, if they are exceeding that amount.
I'll jump in if that's okay. I was just looking back at some of their numbers. I am comfortable with the staff recommendation because I do think it does give them room to grow, and I am concerned that the 13% increase is not realistic for the reasons that you've outlined, Chair Foster. So I'm good with the staff recommendation.
Is there any penalty for a hospital coming in under our limit for NPR? So if they are over projecting their NPR, but they came in under, is there any harm associated with that?
I would say the harm would be the increased expenses and the loss that's built into the budget as a result.
Contingent on their increasing expenses in anticipation of revenue that they do not achieve. Yeah, I think I have understood that argument in the past, particularly when they were under prior leadership. I haven't seen that type of budgeting or operational strategy with the new leadership, and that's part of why I bring this up for consideration now.
Any other board member discussion? I'm not sure if we need a roll call vote. Why don't I take a roll call? Mark, I believe you or Mr. Barber generally take that. Do you want me to do it, or would you prefer to do it?
That's a great question. I haven't had the pleasure of doing a roll call vote yet.
Well, it's not that pleasurable.
Everything here, you can find some pleasure in all of this, Owen. I may not be fully prepared with language to do it correctly. If Mike is on, I wouldn't oppose that, or if you want to do it.
So I think I think I've seen it enough where I can counsel you briefly just on the spot. Nothing too complicated. You simply call each board member in order, I think, alphabetically, and the chair goes last, and you ask whether they're for or against the motion, yay or nay, and you just take it one by one, and then I'll go last.
Perfect. So you get to test both my legal skills and my alphabet. So we'll all right, let's do it. Member Holmes, are you for or against the motion?
Yes, 4.
Member Lunge, are you for or against the motion?
I'm a yes.
Member Merman, are you for or against the motion?
I'm against the motion.
Member Walsh, are you for or against the motion?
Also against.
And Chair Foster.
I'm for the motion. So the motion carries 3-2 in the order that is written. We'll note the nays and the yays. Thank you, Mr. Hengsler. Well done. I won't try and test your math on the spot. The next motion. University of Vermont Medical Center, no changes to the staff recommendation. I move to approve UVM MC's budget with modifications as follows. With fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 3.5% over its fiscal year 24 budget. Over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, reduced from 3.9%, and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 6.8%, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
Any board member discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And the motion carries. I think I want to take a brief pause, as I know we have CVMC, I think, next. Why don't we take a 15-minute break? And actually, let's make it 10, a 10-minute break. And we'll come back at 11:10, and we will dismiss Member Merman from the next motion. Maggie, we can go off the record. Maggie, we can go back on the record.
We are back on the record.
Member Merman has been dismissed from the CVMC deliberations and potential vote. Mr. Hengsler, could you just confirm that Dr. Merman is not present?
Taking a look right now. Confirmed.
Great, thank you. And could we please bring up the CVMC motion? There's been no change from the staff recommendation on the CVMC motion. However, there was a typographical error that was noted that I think is non-substantive in terms of the proposed motion, but has been corrected here. As advised that the motion originally indicated that CVMC had requested 5 or 5.5%. That was an error. The CVMC had requested 6.54%, which is noted here in red. But the staff recommendations as to the NPR or the change in charge have not been modified. So I will move to approve CVMC's budget with modifications as follows: with fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of no more than 6% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, reduced from 11.9, and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 6.54%. With no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this motion. I will ask if there's a second on the motion.
I'll second.
And board member discussion.
I'm happy to start off. I did not find their argument for a growth rate over guidance to be credible or persuasive.
Other board member discussion?
And I think I was at the opposite spectrum from Tom. I was concerned that given their current projections for 24, that something is off, and because I think that with the current NPR and the current char overall change in charge and commercial rate at 3.4%, you just look at the value of the rate increase, they're very likely over NPR. But I think for me, I don't know what the right thing to do here, so I'm going to go with the staff recommendation, understanding that they are also a hospital that may have some issues on their 25 budget and need to ask for something.
We agree that something's off, Robin. Unlike with Springfield, where I appreciated Chair Foster's comment that if they do go over, they can come in and request. Here, my discomfort is that they most likely will exceed whatever we allow. And I think this is an organization that needs, and is part of a system that needs tighter guardrails.
And I believe we should be getting actuals, well, in coming months for fiscal year 24. So not that soon, but where fiscal year 24 lands, we should get that information. If they have an update that they want to provide, we certainly want that at any time. I think both views are noted. Mr. Hengsler, I may put you back into action for a roll call unless there's other board discussion. Actually, I'm sorry. You know what, Mark, let me actually open it up to public comment. There was the typographical correction, and so just to be sure there's no other comment on that, I'd like to open it up for public comment.
And Chair Foster, apologies, but just to say, I do believe that, again, the 6.54% change is a request from CVMC that we got during the break. And I just want to note that my understanding is this was the figure that was in their narrative. I understand that the workbook submitted, the rate decomposition sheet, is likely where staff had gotten the 5.5 that was in the slides earlier this week. So just for the record, to the extent that there's any confusion about what the ask of CVMC was, I just want to put forth that we're using the 6.54 in here because it was in the narrative. CVMC made the request, and we just want to be sure that we're clearly communicating what the hospital believed it was asking for.
Great. I will take public comment. I see that Ms. Patino has her hand raised.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Foster and members of the Green Mountain Care Board. I appreciate the position y'all are in, but I did want to support the questions that Robin, our member Lunch, was asking about the net patient revenue. And you are correct. We are already well underway of 8.5% of the 11.9. We are already realizing in our 2024 run rate.
Thank you. And if you don't mind me asking, is that through August?
That was through budget submission, and the volumes continue to still be at the same levels. So yes, sir, it is.
I will just flag the amendment process that's available to hospitals to take a look at. It might be worth evaluating that at this point. And thank you for your comment.
And I also wanted to reconfirm, and I thank the staff for recognizing the 6.54% was the actual commercial rate increase ask, not the presentation for the aggregate cost from that new compensation schedule. It was the 6.54. So I thank you for correcting this for the record.
Ms. Barby, any other? I saw you come on screen. Did you have anything to say?
I just want to be consistent in how we're referencing what we're reducing. So I don't think the 6.54 compares to the 3.4. I think we should keep the 5.5 because that's how we're going to bring down the rate to the 3.4. Those two numbers are coming to the same definition. So I understand there may be other definitions cited in the narrative, but I think if hospitals want clarity, and we're going to get clarity on the actual reductions from the request or the additions that we're offering from prior year budgets, I think I can publish a spreadsheet that makes clear, but it's going to tie to the 5.5, which is in the rate decomposition, which has been the basis of our commercial negotiated rate conversations with all the hospitals over the last several months. So I want everyone to be clear. There might be rates cited in the narratives, but I have no way of tying that back to the budget, which is why we came up with the rate decomposition workbook. So just for clarity's sake, I would hope that we're all talking about the same rate. Feel like that's important to say.
So, Ms. Barby, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. The 5.5 came from the workbook. Your view is that the 5.5 should be the amount represented in the motion, as that's consistent with how all other hospital rate requests were portrayed?
Yes, and how the analysis was done and how the guidance was written, and it's what we would expect hospitals to be working from to get to that 3.4.
Understood. I think I would prefer.
Yeah.
I would prefer to keep it consistent, and we've discussed this and noted it on the record. It's a non-substantive change in terms of the actual proposal from staff. So I will make the motion with the apples to apples number of 5.5 exactly, Ms. Barabee? Is that correct?
Yes, it's 5.5 per their workbook.
And we can note on the record as we have that there was a 6.54% request in the narrative, but for purposes of the motion, I will return to the 5.5. So I move to approve CVMC's budget with modifications as follows, with fiscal year 25 MPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 6% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, reduced from 11.9%, and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 5.5%, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
Any
Mr.
other
Chairman,
board?
you didn't take all the public comment.
Yeah, I'm aware of how the process works. And if you have one, you should raise your hand.
I can't raise them. I'm on the phone.
Okay, well, why don't you mute and then we'll take public comment. Is there any board member discussion on the motion?
Nothing additional to what I had earlier.
And we will take public comment via raise the hand. Ms. Champney?
Good morning, Chair Foster and board members. I want to highlight the conversation that was just had regarding reference to where the rate is coming from, whether it's the decompensation rate sheet or a definition. This goes back to something we included in our objection letter, but also what Mr. Del Trecco mentioned earlier in his public comment, is understanding the terms and the definitions and what the Green Mountain Care Board is referring to is the only way we can appropriately report our budget and know what we're being measured against. And even within the conversation here, there appeared to be confusion within the board and what was referenced. And a 6.5 versus a 5.5, those are meaningful differences in our budgets, and we need to be extremely clear and have clear standards that we can all make sure we're measured against. And thus, I'd want to still object to not having the clear definition and the rate. I know you said it was non-substantive, but I just want to raise that objection again.
Sure, thank you. My reference to non-substantive was really in terms of the proposed motion rate and NPR that the board had put forward in the prior staff recommendation. Not to minimize your view of what number should be represented it was reduced from. Any other public comment? Mr. Hanks, I'm not sure, but it might be best to take a roll call.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Okay, Member Holmes, are you for or against the motion?
Yes, for.
Member Lunge, are you for or against the motion?
Yes, for.
Member Walsh, are you for or against the motion?
Against.
And Chair Foster, are you for or against the motion?
For.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I think we need to take another short break to allow Dr. Merman to come back, and just for folks from hospitals and the public, we'll next turn to, I think we have 4 motions for hospitals where there have been modifications since the staff made their recommendations. So we'll take those up next. Then we will break for lunch. Then we'll have an executive session, and then we'll return for enforcement. So we can adjourn for 5 minutes, and we'll come back at 11:37. And we go off the record, Maggie. Is Dr. Merman back? I will give it another minute or two for Dr. Merman. Mr. Henksler, are you back?
I'm back online. Yep.
All right, Maggie, you can go back on the record.
We're back on the record.
Okay, we can resume our hearing of September 11th. As I mentioned earlier, there's a couple hospitals where the staff and board members received information, and the motions as recommended by staff have changed, and we will address those next. I think the next motion is Copley Hospital.
I think next up we have NMC, but I'll pull up the presentation and we can take a look. And I'll also explain the formatting here so that you understand what you're looking at. Just give me one moment. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through what I've done using NMC as an example. So here you see the language as taken up in motion by the board at prior deliberative session with the change as with other hospitals in blue. This is we'll call this the old motion language or the current motion language. And then on the next slide, what I have is suggested new motion language, which is identical, but for the change marked in red. So what you'll see here is that the suggested new motion language, rather than approving NPR at a growth rate of not more than 6%, seeks to approve NPR at a growth rate of not more than 6.8%, which is the amount as requested in NMC's initial budget submission.
Great. And what I'll do is we will see if anyone wants to make the motion, see if it gets seconded, have discussion. Since it's a new motion and a substantive change, I'll open it up to public comment, and I will table the motions, or I'll move to table the motions after, at the end of this segment. And then we'll keep public comment open till Friday, and then we'll take up these motions on Friday. Does that work, Mr. Henksler?
Yep, that's spot on, Chair Foster.
Okay, great. All right. Would anyone? I'll make this motion. I move to approve NMC's budget with modifications as follows: with fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 6.8% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, with fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 6.4%, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount, and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
And I'll open it for board member discussion.
I'll jump in on this one. So I support increasing NMC's NPR back up to the 6.8% budgeted amount. I think basically this, I think strategically supporting the growth of low-priced hospitals in Vermont, especially those who are lowest price in their region, I think allows for growth of care at those hospitals, which I think overall is cost effective for Vermonters and helpful for the community. Northwest, at least in the RAND pricing and in the Burns pricing, I believe is the, if not the lowest, but if you, one of the lowest priced hospitals in Vermont. RAND, it's the lowest, and Burns, it's pretty close. So a 3.4% increase, if we were to take the RAND standardized outpatient pricing for Northwest, is essentially half the increase in dollars as a 3.4% increase is for North Country. Because North Country's prices, at least in RAND outpatient pricing, when outpatient's driving most of the revenue, is nearly double. Its Northwest price is 50.8% of North Country's price, or 56.4% of UVM's price, or 59% of NVRH's price. So I would actually support, I mean, so if each of them continues to get the same 3.4% increase, the actual dollar amounts of the charges differ. So for a $1,000 procedure at North Country, 3.4% leads to $34 increase, but that same procedure at Northwest would be, if again, applying the RAND pricing, would be just over $500, and it would go up by, you know, $16 or $17, a little less than, around, actually it's just tiny bit over half of what North Country would go up. So I would propose that we actually approve Northwest to get its full 6.4%, which is actually still less than North Country getting 3.4% in absolute dollars. Still less, it would be just over UVM getting 3.4% and just over NVRH getting 3.4%. But again, their prices are the lowest to start with.
Other board member discussion?
This is Tom. I find your argument compelling, Dave. Can you offer any more rationale for the price increase other than allowing them to raise prices? I am comfortable incentivizing increased volume. I'm uncomfortable with Vermont prices rising when Vermont prices are some of the highest in the country, even our low price hospitals. So I just like to understand what's driving your desire for the increased price other than,
well,
yeah, please. Sorry.
Well, I don't want healthcare to cost more. And I appreciate the idea that prices is prices, but I also, it's not lost on me that there's a marketplace out there. And if we're voting to increase prices for hospitals that are, you know, proximal to this hospital that have higher prices to begin with, and giving more, it's the same percentage, but more total price dollars to those prices, it puts a market disadvantage to this hospital, who I think is one of the hospitals in Vermont that's pretty well positioned to slowly bring some of its some of the volume that's moving away from it back to it. So so while I would agree with the sentiment of trying to keep prices down in general, I think that actually allowing a little price growth at the really low priced hospital, at least equivalent to the other hospitals that we're approving, would be helpful for this hospital and for the overall flow of patients in the state.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any other board member comment? I would just thank NMT for its feedback and for the staff working through some of the feedback we had and making the change, which I support. I just note there was, it's a significant change and it's one I do support. So Mr. Henksler, I'm going to open up to public comment and then we will table the motion at the end of this section. So any public comment on the motion?
Yes,
Mr. Wright?
on the phone.
So Mr. Davis, I'll get to you in 1 second. I'm going to go to Mr. Wright first.
Yes, I just wanted to publicly thank the comments that have been made.
Sorry, let me interrupt just to yeah, thanks, Mr. Davis.
I just wanted to say thank you for the recognition of the differences in the market and the support of the comments we made earlier. We appreciate the consideration of the kind of unique circumstances and appreciate the support that came from those comments.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. And I believe, Mr. Davis, you were on the phone. You can unmute if you'd like and make a comment. Any other public comment? We'll leave this open till Friday for additional public comment. And Mr. Henksler, you can go to the next hospital.
So same formatting here. This is the suggested motion language that was taken up by the board for Copley. I'm going to just let you take a look at this one for a moment to refresh your recollection, and then I'll go ahead and turn to the suggested new motion language on the next slide. And again, the item in red is the change, and that is a change from 6.4% to 3.4%. And same process, Chair Foster, for this one.
I will go ahead and make the motion. I move to approve Copley's budget with modifications as follows, with fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 6% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, reduced from 11.8% and a commensurate reduction in operating expenses. With fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 3.4% over current approved levels, reduced from 10.5%, and with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount, and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
I'll open up to board member comment.
I'll just jump in. I am more comfortable with a lower commercial rate approval for Copley. I actually could go higher than the 3.4%, but I'm comfortable with it. That it is in part because it looks like they are having some good volume rebound in this current fiscal year based on their fiscal year projected provided. And I have a concern that with the higher rate that they will really not be able to maintain the 6% NPR growth. So that's sort of my thinking, but certainly open to other people's thoughts and interested in other ideas.
Thank you, Robin. My comment regarding Copley is the same as I made for Springfield, and the same sentiment that I have for Northwest. They're low-cost facilities for Vermonters. Their leadership has been managing costs well, and I think we should encourage growth at those organizations. I do understand Chair Foster's remark earlier that if this rate is set, and they go over, they can ask for a mid-year adjustment. That does provide me some comfort. But I would like to see the growth rate, the allowed growth rate higher than 6% at Copley.
I have a similar view to that, I think that Copley, along with Northwest and Springfield, have not very low prices compared to the average in Vermont. They're not actually very low compared to national averages, but in order to encourage access to care at the lower priced facilities in Vermont, I would be comfortable with and I'd actually prefer an NPR growth rate to be higher than 6% for Copley. With regards to the commercial rate, Copley has had these low prices over time, but has had a lot of rate increases recently, and it appears that the commercial revenue growth has increased pretty substantially over the last couple of years. So I am actually okay with the 3.4% guidance for the commercial rate for Copley, but would prefer a NPR growth rate that's higher than 6%, closer to its submitted rate. I would be comfortable with something like 9% in order to allow continued growth at a lower priced organization.
Any other board member comment on the motion? Okay. I'll open it up to public comment. Mr. Wooden.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to make a comment. I was just surprised this morning when I saw that change. I'm not sure what process happened between the last presentation. Initially, the staff recommendation, then the last presentation. So I'm not sure what's changed. I do continue to have that problem of our prices charges, which I really appreciate the slide early on where we had price times volume minus expenses gives operating margin. I really appreciated that on a number of slide decks when we first started this process. But our prices and charges continue to be so dramatically low. We're pretty much the least expensive hospital overall. When you look at all aspects, not just inpatient, outpatient, the facility charges, but so it looks like I've had increases over the past 5 years. I'm sure I'm the #1 hospital with the most percentage increases, but still, if I do a procedure that only charges $2,000, which we have examples of these, and if you go to the medical center, they get close to $7,000. That's just one of many. Sometimes it's 1,000% difference. I'm having a hard time catching up, so that just I want to throw that out. I appreciate the NPR movement, but I'm still going to have a hard time. I can't even increase volume because I don't have the infrastructure or resources, so it just becomes a problem. Thanks for listening. We did start off at 10.5%, got to 6.4, and now you cut that in half pretty much to 3.4. So I'm pretty disappointed because I don't know how I'm going to make it work. So we'll have those discussions, but our prices are really low. Percentage increases, yes, but when you're talking about, for example, the comment that Dave Merman made on the previous slide or discussion, it's like when you're still that far behind. I think Vermont's going to have to grapple with the basic prices that get charged. I know that's really uncomfortable. I know getting a single auditor might be uncomfortable, but we're going to have to talk about what are the basic prices being charged because they're all over the map. But thanks for listening. Appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, Mr. Wooden. They're astute. Any other public comment?
Yes, I have a comment. This is Ham.
Yes.
I'm on the phone.
I can hear you, Mr. Davis. You're getting a little feedback, so I don't know if you have your computer too. Maybe mute the computer and use the phone.
Yes, I'll get away from it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just taking this opportunity to just to say something, a couple of things about what's going on. Is that the whole arc of this, the Green Mountain Care Board's processes from starting with May 20th have been striking, and I think they are extremely damaging to the whole Vermont hospital system. I understand that nobody agreed, that you folks don't agree with that, but I just wanted to say it. One of the real examples is Copley. I've written about that. I call them a black swan. They are the single small hospital in Vermont that makes real total sense. And the fact of the matter is they have the day's cash on hand is garbage. I mean, it's in bankruptcy area. They can't even buy lunch. So I really just think that's number one. I wanted to just say that. The second thing I wanted to say, Mr. Chairman, I think it's very important. The people of Vermont, all the people that live in Vermont need the Vermont hospital system to function well. And none of this talk over the last 2 or 3 weeks on this board has been about what's really going on in healthcare. It's all about legal ways to enhance the power of the board, already by far the strongest board in the whole United States, and to make it so hard that nobody can. The hospital presidents are all telling you the same thing. They can't do what you want them to do. And I think that's true. The third thing I want to say is the people of Vermont have no clue what's going on with the hospital. None. There's no press. Take a look. There's not any press anywhere. And so what I think is that it's unconscionable if you don't set up some kind of a process through NOAA or whoever is running the ship, okay? So that somebody who's a legitimate journalist, okay, and is trying to do the work and can actually talk to somebody. It doesn't, having public comment, being able to get on the public comment, doesn't even become close to be able to inform the public. You don't inform the public. The public is absolutely ignorant of everything you're doing. Thank you.
If you're done with your comment, you can mute. Just we avoid feedback. Any other public comment? I'll just respond to the media thing. We speak with the media all the time. My media schedule has been remarkably extensive. I never imagined it would be as extensive as it is. And I don't know if there's anything that's been appropriate to discuss that the media's asked for an interview on that I've ever said no to. CAX, Digger, 7 Days, Financial Times, ABC News National. We speak with the media as frequently as we possibly can, while also managing the work. But I don't think a major media outlet has submitted a request on a topic we can speak to that's ever been denied in my time, I don't think. So appreciate the comment. Very much important that Vermonters understand. That's partially why we had a very extensive community engagement process this last summer, where the staff and the board spent a good amount of the summer traveling around the state to meet with people in the communities and get feedback. So I think it's really important, and I think we're trying really hard to do that as much as we can. So thank you for the comment, but I did think that was worth responding to. Next, Mr. Hengstler.
And we're tabling at the end. Thank you for the reminder. I was waiting for that. I'm going to just actually very briefly pull this down and then pull it back up, because I wanted to make sure one of the slides was as I'd intended on there. And I think it was in the deck correctly, but just in case it wasn't, make sure we're set. Okay. So next up, I'm going to turn to Porter. And again, I'm doing the same thing. I'm giving you the original motion language as picked up. I'll just give everybody a minute to take a look at it again to refresh their recollection. What I will note while you're looking at that is that this motion has taken up was a motion to approve Porter's budget with modifications. And I'm going to go ahead and turn now to the suggested new motion language, which is a motion to approve the budget as submitted. And here you'll notice that while the 2.5% in item 2 has not changed, there has been a change increasing NPR from 3.5 in the current motion to 4.2 as requested in this motion.
Thank you. I will make the motion. I move to approve Porter Medical Center's budget as follows, with fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 4.2% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, with fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 2.5% over current approved levels, with no commercial rate increase for any payer exceeding that amount and subject to all other standard budget conditions as approved by this board.
I'll second.
Board member discussion. One comment, I support this change, and part of it goes to the way the network operates and an opportunity for the network to move expensive care at the medical center to a lower cost location. And based on some of the information that Porter provided us in comment. So I approve this modification. Any other board member comment at this time? And public comment. Okay. I will break for lunch now. We will take up a Scutney after the executive session with the enforcement materials, and I will move to table those motions after we take up the other ones. So I think at this time we can take a lunch break. We have a couple things on the board side to do during the break, so I'm going to take a full hour for lunch so we can address a couple things. So at this time we'll take a break until 1:10. We'll come back at 1:10 and we'll go from there. We can go off the record.